Hello book besties and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I have a very exciting video because I will be assigning awards to all of my favorite books this year. So I set up like little categories for like my favorite romance, my favorite fiction, my favorite YA romance, favorite YA mystery, that kind of thing. Also, since I love listening to music and I love watching movies and TV shows, I also like put categories for like my favorites of all of those as well. So without further ado, let's get into it. The first category is my favorite fiction read of the year. It is Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I absolutely fell in love with this book. I also fell in love with the TV show. I thought that they were both incredible. It was like a bit of a different book for me because I don't typically read things where like romance isn't like the forefront of the book. There was romance in this book, but I wouldn't say that that's like the main focus. I honestly really loved it. I flew through it. Characters were all really unique and different, and I've never really read characters like these ones before, and it was really good. Next up, we have favorite romance. This was a very hard pick. I had such a large selection of books that I loved that were all romance this year. But the winner of this category is Happy Place by Emily Henry. Anybody who has been watching my videos or just knows me as a person knows that this is one of my favorite books of all time. I have never felt more connected to a pair of characters in like a contemporary romance like ever. As soon as I started reading this, it just became an absolute favorite and I cannot get over it. This book made me an Emily Henry fan. I have yet to read any of her other books, but I am so excited to start. Next up, we have favorite mystery. I absolutely love mystery books. I feel like I have not read enough mystery this year, but I did fall in love with a few new authors and fell in love with a few new mystery books, so the winner of this category is The Only One Left by Riley Sager, or Sager. I'm not sure how you pronounce that. Honestly, really love this book. I read it within like 3 or 4 days. I could not put it down. I really was not able to predict any of the twists that were in this book. I thought that it was really well written. I liked all of the characters, and it really just kept me engaged. I did want to mention one of my new favorite mystery authors though, which is Frida McFadden. I absolutely love her books. I love The Locked Door. I think that I either read that really late last year or really early this year, but I thought that it was absolutely incredible, and I've never been able to predict any one of her endings either, so I just wanted to mention her since she's one of like my favorite mystery authors. Next up, we have favorite romantasy. I feel like everybody's already gonna know what I'm going to say for this one. I talk about it so much. It's the love of my life. I am absolutely obsessed with it. And the winner is Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros, which shocks absolutely nobody. I never stop talking about this book. I love this book so much. I have never felt more connected and related more to a female main character ever. I loved it so much that I read it twice just this year, and it was just absolutely incredible. It was also my first like kind of adult fantasy. I know that it's technically categorized as new adult, but it was like my first not young adult fantasy, so I'm counting it. Next up, we have our young adult categories, which was arguably the hardest categories for me to pick books for because this is my main genre. I typically pull towards YA books. I absolutely love them. So this one was definitely really hard. Starting off with YA fiction, I chose If He Had Been With Me, and this book was one that really made me sob. I was so devastated over this book. It was so beautiful. I thought that the writing was really beautiful, and I just thought that the plot itself was really different. I wasn't sure if I should categorize this as romance or not because I think that technically it is a young adult romance, but I kind of pulled more towards like the fiction part of it, like aside from the romance, so I'm gonna count it as fiction. I fell in love with the characters, and I'm so excited to read the new book that is coming out early next year. Next up, we have young adult fantasy. Honestly, in YA, I read the most fantasy. I love young adult fantasy because it's so easy to grasp. It doesn't make me feel like I'm confused or anything, and it's just so amazing. The winner of this one is Sorcery of Thorns by Margaret Rogerson. Anybody who knows me knows that Nathaniel Thorne is the love of my life. I think I've said that so many times within the past how many videos. I would consider this a romantasy, but would consider it more of like a subplot. I don't think that the romance is forefront. It's not really the focal point of the book. The focal point of the book is more about like the magic that's going on, the world building, and I just fell in love with Margaret Rogerson and her writing. I think that the way that she writes her characters and the way that she writes her books like really just makes you feel like you're being transported into this magical world, and this book means so much to me. The characters mean so much to me, and I just loved it. YA romance. It was so hard to pick just one, but the winner of this one is Better Than the Movies by Lynn Painter. I also feel like this is going to shock absolutely nobody. I am so obsessed with Liz Buxbaum and Wes Bennett, and I just think that they are so cute, and I'm so excited for the sequel that is coming out in the fall of 2024. I just cannot wait to get back into this world, get back into these characters. It's one of those books that I will constantly recommend to people when they're in a reading slump or anything. Like, honestly, it's just one of those books that I cannot stop thinking about. It's one of my all-time favorite books, so Better Than the Movies by Lynn Painter. For YA mystery, I did read a few YA mystery books. I feel like most of the mystery that I read this year was categorized as adult mystery, but my favorite mystery that I read this year that was young adult was The Naturals by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. The best way that I can explain this book, it's Criminal Minds for kids. I felt like the characters felt so much like home. Like, I don't know if that sounds weird or if that makes sense, but when I would go and I would read the next books in the series, it felt like I was being reunited with friends, and it was just so familiar and so comforting, and I really enjoyed it. It was honestly so much different than anything that I've ever read, like in the YA mystery kind of plot, and it was just amazing. I really loved it. The next category, and my favorite category, is young adult romantasy. I love this genre so much that I literally could not just pick one. I have 3 favorites that I absolutely love, so this award is given to 3 of my favorite romantasy books. First up is 1,000 Heartbeats by Kiera Cass. This book is so amazing, and I will never shut up about it. I have found that princess books are kind of becoming my niche and kind of becoming my thing. Like, I feel like I have never read a princess book that I didn't like, and it's just amazing, and I love it. And this kind of started that entire ball rolling of my favorite books being princessy and magical and just mystical and just enchanting, I guess. Romance and just the quotes that are in this book just mean the world to me, and it's just my favorite. I love it. Next up is Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross, and this book was another one that I could not leave this out of this category. I could not give this book an award because it has meant so much to me since I read it. Again, beautiful writing style, beautiful story, and just a plot unlike anything that I have ever read before. I also thought that the world building in this was really easy to understand. It didn't feel like too much information was being thrown at you at once. It just kind of felt like this was the perfect kind of young adult fantasy with amazing romance in it. I am also very excited for the sequel to come out, which it does come out later this month in December, but I did order the UK copy of it, so I don't think that I'm going to be getting it until January, but regardless, I'm excited about it. And the last book that I'm awarding this title to is Once Upon a Broken Heart by Stephanie Garber. This is another princessy book that I just completely fell in love with. Again, Stephanie Garber has some of the most interesting and unique plots that I have ever read about in my life. Every time that I read a book of hers, I'm just baffled by the amount of creativity that lives in her brain and the cool worlds that she can come up with. It's just crazy, and I love this book. Now that we've more or less gotten the standalone titles handed out, I am going to do my favorite series. There are only 2 categories for the series, and I decided to split them up into just my regular adult series and then my young adult series. So my favorite series is the Empyrean series by Rebecca Yarros, and that is Iron Flame and Fourth Wing, and those books truly took over my entire life this year, and they were just so amazing. And I read Iron Flame as soon as it came out. I finished it within a week, and it was just one of those books that when you're reading, you're just completely transported into that world. It's honestly one of those series that I will never be able to forget, and it's not even over. It is an incompleted series, and I am patiently awaiting the announcement of the next book. I love when fantasy books are kind of set in that kind of school setting, university setting, and this was just perfect for that, and I just cannot wait to see what Rebecca Yarros does next. My favorite YA series, I honestly didn't finish a lot of series this year, but the series that I loved the most was The Summer I Turned Pretty by Jenny Han. I remember this summer, as soon as I finished the series, I went back and I read the first one again. That just shows how much I loved it. It's just an amazing series, and I cannot wait to reread it next summer. Now that we've gotten all of the books out of the way, I just wanted to take a few minutes to appreciate some of my favorite other types of media. So my favorite TV show this year, I watched a lot of TV shows this year, but I think that my favorite and the one that stands out the most is The Crowded Room. I watched that on Apple TV, and it was so different. I have never watched a series like that before in my life. Tom Holland was so incredibly talented. He was just so amazing with all of the different characters that he had to play and the different things that he had to do. I'm no actor, but I just can imagine the emotional turmoil that would have caused to like have to go through all of that, and he did just an amazing job, and it was such a good series. My favorite movie this year, I also watched a lot of movies, but the movie that stands out the most would be Prom Pact. I watched this one on Disney Plus, and it had the love of my life, Milo Manheim, in it, and I love him, and he's perfect, and I've watched almost every movie that he's in because I'm just obsessed with him. It was just a really, really cutesy, like kind of young adult rom-com, and it was just adorable, and I loved it. My favorite song, or I guess the song of the year for me, would be Mirrorball by Taylor Swift. And I feel like this is always my song of the year. I feel like this is always the song that I listen to the most, but it honestly means a lot to me. I wrote 2 papers about it just this past semester, which was really fun, and it just means a lot to me. And along with that, my favorite album is, you guessed it, Folklore by Taylor Swift. Whenever I am in any sort of mood, I feel like I just gravitate towards Folklore because it's just such a beautifully written album, and it just has some of my most favorite songs ever, and I'm so obsessed with it. And I realized that I forgot to talk about my book of the year, like my favorite book of all time. So I guess that's a perfect way to end the video. It is Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. I have honestly talked about this a lot, but I really, really related to the female main character in a way that I have never related to anybody before. And it's just a really, really special book for me. So I would say that this is definitely my book of the year. And that is it for today's video. I have been so excited to film this video. I've been so excited to give out awards to my favorite books of all time. So I really hope that you enjoyed watching it. As always, if you'd like to connect with me on my other social media, you can follow me on Instagram at the Heartfelt Library, on TikTok at heartfelthan, or on GOODREADS at heartfelthan. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.